The Yukon 2 is an advanced stone cutting machine designed for precise, efficient, dependable performance. It quickly and easily sets up for manual operation, or it can be programmed for full automatic operation. The Yukon 2 performs cuts, adjusts speed, and executes complex commands all on its own through multiple cutting cycles, just as dependably as if an operator was present. This video presentation is meant to get you started with the Yukon 2. It is divided into 4 key segments: an overview of basic components and layout, instructions on pre-cutting setup procedures, cutting operations, and finally maintenance procedures. This presentation can't cover everything, so to get the most out of your Yukon 2, be sure to carefully read all safety materials and operation manuals supplied by Park Industries. Let's begin with an overview of the Yukon 2's basic components and layout. The operator uses 2 controllers to operate the machine: the operator panel and the pendant. On the operator panel, you'll find joysticks that control the direction of the saw and potentiometers or pots that control the speed at which it moves. The touch screen allows you to perform many different functions through a series of screens, setting the location, speed, and direction of the cut. Manual and automatic operation, access to different cutting cycles, and diagnostics for quick troubleshooting. You can even change the controls between English and Spanish. The pendant has basic controls, 2 buttons for each axis of arbor movement. They allow you to easily move the saw as well as set limits to control the travel of the saw. The remote pendant lets the operator get close to the cutting surface for more precise work. Located just behind the main control panel is the laser reference assembly, which projects a laser beam onto the stone for precise alignment. Be sure not to look into the laser's beam, as this will cause damage to your eyes. The saw blade and arbor motor are mounted on the cross-travel assembly, which travels from side to side along the bridge, forward and backward along the gantry, as well as up and down. All cutting operations are based on these 3 dimensions, so it's essential that you understand the direction the arbor travels over the cutting surface. Cutting occurs on what's called the x-axis. The side of the machine that is nearest to the control panel is called the X plus end of the machine, and the side farthest from the control panel is called the X minus end. Movement toward the control panel is considered X plus movement, and movement away from the control panel is considered X minus movement. Movement along the gantry occurs on the y-axis. Movement toward the rear of the machine is considered Y plus movement, and movement toward the front is considered Y minus movement. The y-axis is the dimension on which you align cuts. Up and down movement occurs on the z-axis. Upward movement is called Z plus, and downward movement is called Z minus. The z-axis determines how deep a cut will be, and whether the blade will clear the top of the slab while moving. All of these directions are labeled on the machine. Cutting a part in more than one direction is achieved by rotating and aligning the table to the desired angle. Miter cuts are achieved by changing the angle of the bridge. On the X plus side of the machine, we find the miter actuator assembly, which allows you to make this adjustment. Locking mechanisms, either the pneumatic actuator shown here or the standard bolt style, are found on either end of the Yukon 2. Located on the bridge are the mechanisms that drive the bridge along the gantry, the gantry drive shaft, and the end trucks, which are found at both the X plus and X minus ends of the bridge. The more you know about the Yukon 2, the faster and more efficient you will be. Take the time to learn all the parts of the machine and their functions, as well as all maintenance requirements. Before we power up the Yukon 2, we need to review critical safety measures. First of all, you must read all the safety materials and training manuals provided by Park Industries before operating this machine. Be sure to wear safety glasses or goggles, proper ear protection, and steel-toe safety shoes. Do not wear loose clothing or anything that will come into contact with moving parts. Do not look into the laser during operation. This will cause eye damage, even while wearing safety glasses or goggles. All operators using this machine must first be trained in its operation, and they must be experienced in the use of automated equipment. Do not modify this machine or use it for a purpose for which it wasn't designed. And remember, compliance with local, state, and federal safety laws and regulations is the responsibility of you, the operator. So be sure everyone in your shop works safely. Before powering up your machine, perform a visual inspection to make sure everything looks to be in good order, that there are no exposed wires or open panels, and nothing is leaning against the machine or resting in its rails. Make sure all personnel are clear of the machine before powering it up. If everything looks satisfactory, turn on the power at the main breaker. If you have a tilting turntable, you will power up your Yukon 2 and your hydraulic power unit. On the operator panel, disengage the E-stop by pulling it out. Then press the System On button. Notice that the green light remains on after you release the button. On the touch screen, press the Home Machine button. Cross Travel Assembly will move to its highest and farthest position to establish a reference point that will be used as a guide for cutting. Once the homing operation is complete, the home machine indicator will read Homed. This must be done each time the machine is powered on. To power off the Yukon 2, push in the E-stop button. The machine has been shut down, and you now can turn off power at the main breaker. It's a good idea to disconnect the power to the machine overnight to protect it from lightning strikes or power spikes. Also, before attempting any repairs or maintenance, be sure to follow any lockout or tagout policy your company might have. Now that the Yukon 2 is powered up, let's take a brief look at the screens that show up on the main control panel. The first one that appears after powering up is the main screen, which you've already used to home the machine. This screen also allows you to change from English to Spanish. Turn the laser on and off, and access the two operating modes, single cut and automatic cut. The main screen also allows you to enter other screens used for setting operating parameters. As the name implies, the single cut screen is used to make single cuts. You can control the type and position of the single cut and monitor the blade speed and amperage used during cutting. Each screen has a help button which presents an explanation of that screen. And the main menu button returns you to the main screen. The automatic mode screen allows you to program the Yukon 2 to automatically perform a series of cuts with one of 4 cutting cycles. The X, Y, and Z axes are all controlled by the computer according to a set of parameters you enter into the machine. The cut data input screen is used to enter the desired cut width, or part size, to be made when cutting in automatic mode. This is important when making multiple cuts, since the Yukon 2 will precisely align the blade for each part while factoring in the kerf of the blade. The diagnostics screen can help our service technicians troubleshoot electrical problems without opening the main component box. It also provides some basic machine control. Soft limits are parameters you program into the Yukon 2 to limit the range of movement of the saw. The Set Limits screen allows you to set these parameters. Soft limits are set for the X-axis to define the length cutting and the Z-axis to define the depth cutting. The Setup screen allows you to set step cutting parameters and the kerf of the blade. You can also recalibrate and adjust the contrast of the touch screen. The Position screen allows you to see the current location of all axes of the machine and the current amps being drawn by the saw. It also allows you to zero out the Y-axis at its present position to use as a reference point. The Amp Control screen allows you to program the Yukon 2 to automatically adjust the machine's speed as it cuts through material based on the amount of electricity it consumes. The computer will not only keep the cut moving at peak speed, but also compensate for hard spots or varying thicknesses in the stone. There are a number of ways to control the movement of the machine, and we'll now cover the most common ways. Becoming familiar with them is critical to productive operations. You will likely settle into the procedures that best fit into your operating style and cutting tasks. First, let's look at the operator panel. Clicking the X or Y joystick to the plus or minus position moves the saw along that axis in the corresponding direction. To stop the saw, return the joystick to the center position. The Y-axis joystick has a lock button, which must be pushed in to prevent sideways movement while cutting. Moving the Z joystick up or down moves it in a plus or minus direction. The operator panel also has speed pots for each axis. Turning these knobs clockwise increases the speed of the saw movement, and turning them counterclockwise reduces it. This allows for the operator to adjust the speed of the saw to the cutting conditions. Machine controls are also found on the pendant. There are 2 buttons for each axis, X, Y, and Z. Press the X plus button to move the saw toward the control panel, to the X plus end of the machine, and press the X minus button to move it away from the control panel, or to the X minus end. The Y plus button moves the saw toward the rear of the machine along the Y axis, and the Y minus button toward the front. The Z plus button moves the saw up on the Z axis. And the Z minus button moves it down. When using the pendant, you're still able to control the speed of the travel with the speed pots. A third way to move the saw is to use the diagnostics screen on the touch screen. Each axis has its own minus and plus buttons, and holding them down will move the saw in the appropriate direction, and releasing the button will stop it. Every operator will have his own way of doing things. By providing multiple ways to operate the saw, the Yukon 2 allows each person to find what's right for him. Now let's review the 4 kinds of cutting cycles that are available on the Yukon 2. Plunge with flyback, plunge cut, step cutting, and bidirectional plunge cut. One of the most common cutting cycles is the plunge with flyback. The saw will make one cut completely through the stone from the X minus to X plus direction. When it reaches the X plus soft limit, it will raise to the upper soft limit and return to the X minus position at high speed. In automatic mode, the saw will move to the new Y-axis position and repeat the cut. To start this cut cycle, the Z-axis must be on its upper soft limit and the X-axis must be on its minus soft limit. With the plunge cut, the blade makes a single pass through the stone and returns through the same cut at high speed to the starting X-axis position. The operator sets the Z-axis position prior to cutting, and it does not move during the cycle. The step cutting cycle cuts through the stone using a multi-step process and is commonly used to cut through thick stone or to minimize chipping. Based on the height of your stone, you decide how much material you are going to remove with each pass. These parameters are input on the setup screen. To start a step cut, the saw must be positioned at the Z plus soft limit, and the X-axis must be at its minus soft limit. The Z-axis will lower to the step drop height pre-programmed by the operator and make its first cut. Then it will lower by steps until it reaches the last pass height preset by the operator. The saw will then move to the X plus end of the table and make the last cut in the minus direction. Note that in this direction the blade is cutting up into the stone. In some cases, this can reduce chipping along the edge of the cut. With the bidirectional plunge cut, the blade will make the desired number of cuts, cutting back and forth in both directions. Bidirectional plunge cutting is available only in automatic mode. A common use for this operation is planing your tabletop. To start the cycle, the Z-axis must be on its lower limit. The machine will initially cut from X minus to X plus. It will change Y-axis position and then cut back to the X minus end of the bridge, and repeat until all cuts are completed. You must be sure to set the X-axis soft limits so that the saw blade is clear of the edge of the tabletop.